if you knew who you were talking to, the Messiah, the Son of God, and didn't get caught up in these factions. When I say caught up in factions, what am I talking about in this verse, in this passage of scripture? What are the factions that she's getting caught up in?
The rules of
Put
the
them in the
land.
chat.
Samaritan versus
Somebody about to say it. The
Samaritan
Samaritans
versus
versus the
Jew.
Jews. All right. I'm gonna take my glasses off. Okay. The Lord was talking to me about this a couple of days ago because I don't know how many of y'all are friends with me on Facebook, but I put something out there. I reposted something from a friend of mine that I agreed with wholeheartedly. He was like, we haven't been given this president. This president doesn't reflect the nation. The nation reflects the president. And I said, ooh, brother, you speaking the truth. Because in the Old Testament, every time God's people got off, they took their sight off of him. They took their sights off, they put their sights on themselves and their wants and their will above him, and they became reprobate and stiff-necked and rebellious. He was like, I'm going to give you a king to reflect your heart. And so he would give them these wicked kings to reflect their wicked heart until they repented and came back to their senses and said, you know what? We need to stop being divided. We need to stop being putting other things before him, as he said, and then they would get good kings. And so what I said, one of the things that I said in my post was, this king, this president that we have is a reflection of the God's people in this country. God's people in this country are divided, y'all. We are too divided, and we're divided ourselves into two factions, just like the Jews were, and Jews and the Samaritans. What are those two factions? Don't. Okay. What are
What?
the two
Democrat,
teams that
Republican?
you, Democrat and
What?
Republican? Democrat and Republican. And until we can put aside these petty differences and understand that there are Christians on both, there should be Christians on both sides of the field, and understand that we need to put the political stuff aside and come together as a people. As long as we're divided, we're going to continue to have a divisive president. And it's not just Trump. Every president has been divisive in some way, shape, or form because we are divided. And so let me give y'all a brief history. Do you know why? And for my men that have already heard this, try to hold your peace. Do you know what the difference was between the Jew and the Samaritan? Why they was beefing? Why the Jews looked down on the Samaritans and the Samaritans was like, well, if y'all don't fool with us, we don't fool with y'all. Does anybody know the history? All right. So it's really about the same family. You know how we get beef with our family, like we don't fool with that side of the family no more. The At one point after Solomon, the Israelites were split into two factions. Okay, because they had a king that usurped and took over the throne, and he began to bring in pagan worship. He began to bring in all manner of stuff, and so the majority of the tribes fell into alignment with him. And then only two tribes was like, no, we're not doing that. Those two tribes were Judah and Benjamin, right? And so those two tribes became, if you look geographically where Judah is, they became the southern kingdom, and their city was Jerusalem. You see Jerusalem mentioned here? Is it? Jerusalem is not mentioned here. But the southern kingdom, that were the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, focused on the city being Jerusalem. This is our capital, Jerusalem. The northern kingdom were the other 10 tribes. Do you know what their capital was? Samaria. So these two factions of Jews and Samaritans, they're brothers fighting brothers. They are all God's people, but one fell first because eventually the Jews, which is they shortened Judah to Jew, and that's how they got Jews. The Jews ended up falling short too, and eventually God was like, "I'm done with y'all too," but they held on for a little longer to the precepts and principles that God had put out to them, unlike the Samaritans. And so they began to look down on the Samaritans. Y'all worship on this mountain. Y'all worship all man. You bringing all manner of unclean, defiled stuff. Y'all are defiled because the law says so. But in truth, the Samaritans were their neighbors. When the scriptures keep talking about who is your neighbor, it's like, who is your brother? Stop all this pettiness. Who is your brother?
Hmm.
And they forgot that. And they've been fighting and fighting and fighting in the Old Testament much the same way as we do today. And so I tell you this so that you know what's really going on. What is this woman really saying to him? Like, yo, you are the southern tribe, because Jesus' tribe was Judah. She was like, y'all the southern tribe. Y'all not supposed to be talking to us. And Jesus ain't concerned with that. One, because it's like we all the same kin. Stop playing.
I
I'm not
have a
concerned.
question.
Yeah.
How did she know?
How does she know?
They dress differently?
They did dress differently, actually.
Okay.
They have fringes and all manner of stuff. That's a
Oh,
great
okay.
question. Yeah,
Okay.
they God was always trying to make sure that they distinguish themselves from the other cultures around them, so they would know, okay, if you see somebody that's not dressed a certain way, that's not eating a certain thing, that's outside of my bloodline. And if you fool with them, you're going to contaminate the bloodline that's going to bring about Jesus Christ into the earth without sin. And that's why he would cut people off and kill them in a second. If you contaminate my bloodline, I'm gonna get ready. I'm not playing around. I got one job, and that's to bring Jesus Christ into the earth without sin. And if you mess with that, that's why he's like, don't intermarry with other nations, because they worship different gods. That's gonna mess with you're gonna contaminate the bloodline. And he's like, don't, this is, you wear a certain thing, you dress a certain thing, you have culture. He gave his chosen people culture so they would know, if you don't do all these things that we do, you're not our kin, you're not part of the chosen people. We can't mess with you, because you're gonna end up doing something. I don't even think they knew what God was setting up. Of course they did, right? But he knew. All right, good question. So that's what's going on in the background. That was my attempt to take a high level look at what was going on between the Jews and the Samaritans and how it's even playing out today. Until we get beyond these politics and beyond this foolishness and understand that we are kingdom, we are going to continue to have divisive leaders because we're divided ourselves.